Prop design is a key element of many movies, big and small, whether it's to create small trinkets or colossal spaceships that can complete the Kessel Run in 14 parsecs.
12! 14.
In other words, prop design can be used for a variety of purposes, all of which are employed to enrich the viewing experience for the audience. This video essay will focus on the less conspicuous props, from George Lucas's miniatures to Marty McFly's hoverboard.
Great Scott!
Unlike prop sourcing, prop design is a creative process in which the designer will sort out to fathom an item, model or the like. This will often be done from scratch with materials like styrene fashioning the piece. Every prop designer draws inspiration from somewhere, which begs the question, where did some of our favourite props come from?
I don't know. That's a good question.
George Lucas is the father of Star Wars, creating almost everything from the story to the characters. He's often held responsible for revolutionising cinema, not only with his blockbuster movies, but with his use of visual effects. A New Hope was created before computer-generated imagery even existed, leaving Lucas to create his sci-fi spaceships in a different way. Miniatures. No, not that type of miniature. Instead, Lucas, with help from designer Paul Huston, would first visualise what they wanted to create, drawing concept art for each prop. The concept of the Millennium Falcon, for instance, was inspired by a burger Lucas was eating one lunchtime.
Here's my quarter pounder with lettuce, pickles, onions, ketchup, mustard, and bacon.
The pair would then map out the blueprints for the prop, building it with a slew of materials from plastic to aluminium. Following this, they'd paint it to fit the galaxy's used future aesthetic, and then it would be ready for filming, and the rest is history. There are, of course, many other examples of famous props. This next example shows that a prop designer can enhance an already existing item, as well as build them from scratch.
What's this?
Back to the Future brought Doc Brown's DeLorean racing into theatres in 1985. With the time-travelling automobile sporting a very different look than viewers were used to in the real world, along with some pretty savvy tech. The updated DeLorean sported many features created entirely by the prop design team, like the enhanced exhaust, the time navigation system, the power coils, and the now famous flux capacitor, which requires 1.21 gigawatts of input.
1.21 gigawatts!
The DeLorean. Gull-wing doors rise effortlessly, beckoning you inside.
The original DeLorean, the DMC-12, looks almost unrecognisable without its movie prosthetics. In fact, it looks boring, a far cry from its film counterpart. This just goes to stress the importance of prop design in cinema and the difference it can make on the way in which the audience reacts. Prop design is far more important than most realise.
Live the dream today.
The next section of this video will follow the creation of my own prop using similar techniques to the ones previously discussed. Here, I set out to follow in the footsteps of George Lucas, creating my own miniature spaceship for use on the big screen. To build this prop, I took inspiration from a multitude of places. I looked to the Mandalorian's Razor Crest for the overall shape, Luke Skywalker's X-Wing for the detailing, and the spherical pods from Jurassic World for the cockpit. The next step was deciding how I'd build my prop. I settled on a mixture of two building styles, scrap building and kit bashing. Scrap building is the art of taking everyday items and recycling them. For example, I turned a bottle into an engine for my ship. Kit bashing is the act of taking pieces from one model kit and using it in your own build. For instance, in my build I used pieces from a jet engine. Next was to assemble my equipment. I collected a load of scrap from my house and ordered a model jet kit. Then I purchased some basic equipment to help me with the build. My first step was to create the side rockets. I do this using a plastic cup and a lid, gluing them together backwards. I then had to let it dry, but this is when I realised that the glue I was using wasn't made for plastic. So at this point, it was back in the car and back to Sainsbury's. I came back with some sticky dots, which could attach on both sides. This seemed to work much better. Following this, I took an old PlayStation controller charging station. This allowed me to make the landing gear. Next up was kit bashing. I took the jet out of the box and took some parts from it. I then took these pieces and sanded them down to make them fit better. Next, to glue them and get them to stick. And the wings. Through research I found that making something look more 3D was the key to a realistic prop, so I added matchsticks here and there. And then came some smaller pieces. I used parts from the jet as well as pieces from an old computer. Following this, I used small wooden buttons to look like screws. Now all the detailing was done. Time to spray paint. I had dinner, and once it was dry, it actually looked kinda cool. To break up the blue, I used some green and black paint. I then used more parts from my old computer to break things up even more. Towards the end you'll see, this comes together quite nicely. Finally, I used plastic couplets to create the cockpit, which looks like the gyrosphere from Jurassic World. I also added tiny little people inside from the jet kit. I allowed an hour for everything to dry, but finally, it was complete. It wasn't all perfect. The materials I used weren't the best. It's all fairly monotonous. You can still see my fingerprints surrounding the exterior. And if I did it all again, I'd fix these things. But I can honestly say that I'm proud of how it turned out. Creating my miniature was a hard and strenuous task, but I learnt a lot and now appreciate the art far more than I ever did before. I hope today that I have informed you of, and maybe even interested you in, the process of prop design. It's an important part of cinema that cannot be overlooked. Thank you for watching.